All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA props video. Going to be giving you guys the game-by-game breakdown here for the Friday slate. It's a pretty big slate. Let's go ahead and get into it. So let's go ahead and start off with the first game here. It's going to be Detroit versus Charlotte, guys. So this is an interesting spot already to start off the video. We have Jaden Ivey out, and we also have Fontecchio out as well here for Detroit. And so let's just take a peek at Detroit. For Charlotte, we're not really getting that many good bets here. Let's take a peek at Detroit. So looking at Detroit, guys, looking at the minutes bump, that's really what we want to concentrate on here. Thompson is someone that could end up getting a good minutes bump. Now, the thing with him is we are getting prop bets, but it does seem to be that most of the data is already adjusting for that said minutes bump, okay, with the lines that we are getting. If you look at kind of who benefits the most with those two players off the court, Jaden Ivey and Fontecchio off the court, it's really not him. It's actually Cade Cunningham gets a little bit of a bump in his points. And so we see maybe 3-pointers made we could potentially go in on, maybe even like points we could go in on. But to me, those lines are seemingly correct as well. So like it does seem to be like they are boosting up those projections properly. Now, Tobias Harris is a strange one here. We're going to notice that his rebounds line is one that we could potentially go in on. And if we like zoom in on it here with Tobias Harris, we're going to notice that, you know, he really has been inconsistent. And so looking at this kind of 53% or so likelihood that he has in this bet, this isn't one that I personally feel like we need to go out of our way to target here with him. And so last time out against Charlotte here, I got it pulled up right down here, 8 rebounds in that game, you know, had 31 minutes in that game. So I do agree with us probably wanting to favor the over here, especially with those players out. Now, he doesn't benefit per se with them off. He actually averages 0.9 less rebounds, but I do think we can expect a slight minutes bump, even though the projection data isn't really telling us to do that. For the most part, to me, that reads as, all right, let's just stay away from kind of really Detroit as a whole, even though I was hoping that we'd be getting a good advantage with some of the bets that we'd be looking at there for them. Let's go ahead and take a peek at Charlotte, guys. Charlotte, no real big difference in terms of projected minutes or in terms of edges that we are getting. So let's go ahead and jump on into the next game. And so looking at this game here, guys, Orlando versus Toronto, we are going to notice that Orlando is pretty banged up still, right? So both the Wagners are still out, Gary Harris is still out, Anthony Black is still out, Benchero is still out. So that is kind of an interesting spot, just with all those players being banged up. The issue with Orlando is that they typically are a team that plays a little bit slower. The games that they're playing in are typically lower scoring games. Now, this game against Toronto is going to be a pretty good matchup for all of Orlando. So let's take a peek at Orlando in general, maybe who we could potentially be on here. So looking at it, guys, Silva is someone that has been seeing a minutes bump, as well as Goga. Again, the issue with Orlando is that for the most part, when they're playing against maybe more difficult matchups, you might not want to be on them. But this is going to be a good matchup for all of them. So I'm kind of hoping that we are going to get some good bets in terms of like those two specifically, Goga, maybe even Jalen Suggs. But what we're going to notice here is that a lot of the sportsbook data that we are getting here for Orlando is kind of telling us to bet the under, which I don't like. You know, I want to see some of these bets where they're telling us to bet the over here, and we're just not getting that. Maybe Jalen Suggs with his over points, not exactly a bet that's really popping up as a great one. Goga potentially over rebounds, but again, already the lines that we're getting here for these guys, they're already kind of adjusted for the matchup. And with those players that are all have been out, we're really not getting an edge there with looking at that. And even when we sorted looking at the NBA PrizePicks cheat sheet here, when we sorted by Orlando, really the only one that we could potentially get on that could be like a good sportsbook bet would be Jonathan Isaac for his over points. You know, we see all the green here where it's kind of telling us to bet the over. Again, he gets a pretty good matchup, the 6 bets matchup there for forwards. We scroll down. The issue with Jonathan Isaac is he's just really not getting the minutes. So we need that good matchup to really be fruitful for him. And that's just not a bet really with Orlando that I feel like we need to go in on. Let's go ahead and jump into Toronto here as well. So Toronto, I think, let's actually jump back into the game preview. I think RJ Barrett is expected to sit out in this game based off of some minutes bumps that we are getting here. Okay, day to day, we don't have his confirmed status yet. We look at the projected starting lineup. He is currently in it, so we'll see. But Emmanuel Quickly is expected to see kind of a minutes bump. Scotty Barnes is expected to see a minutes bump there as well. And we are going to see Scotty Barnes with his 5.5 assists here. This would actually be a good bet if RJ Barrett is off the court, strangely enough. Actually, apologies, guys. No, it's the exact opposite of that. So with RJ, and that actually makes sense to me. RJ Barrett off the court, he actually sees a decrease in his assist by 2, which is pretty big. And that's per 36. And so we're probably not looking at any of these bets here. And, you know, the thing with Toronto is this matchup with Orlando is actually a difficult matchup. Now, I do want to take a deeper dive at Emmanuel quickly here with his 16.5 points. If you adjust it for his projected minutes, he should be able to get the over. The average sportsbook line currently has this at 17.5. Underdog currently has this at 17.5. So a seemingly decent bet there with Jalen Suggs. And so, yeah, guys, again, a bet that I would consider more of a traditional sportsbook bet that we would want to be on. But on PrizePicks, I almost do expect this one to get bumped to 17.5 just because they are clearly the outlier right now. I'm sure. Let's sort this by bet tag. Bet tags here, like a hammer bet is going to be a bet that checks all the boxes, guys, where it's telling us to do something. And sure enough, Emmanuel quickly for his over points is a good bet. Now, we still want to be paying attention to that edge rating. Okay. What I've noticed is that the bets like this, where it's kind of checking all the boxes, tend to hit about 1% more. It's like 1% more than the projected edge rating. Okay, if that makes sense. So this could be more of a 52.3% edge. So like that is still the likelihood for the bet to hit, but because we are getting all the data points checking, it's more of a bet that I want to be going out of my way to target here. But again, more so on more traditional sportsbook bet sites. And we can scroll down here, guys, and take a peek at it. We are seeing different lines there as well. So FanDuel is currently the only one that has it at 16.5. And we can see the lines basically at 50-50 at 17.5. He's someone that hasn't really gone that many minutes throughout the season. We know who Emmanuel quickly is, though, as a player. Like if he does get the minutes that he's projected to get, he should be able to crush this. So it's kind of like last night. Last night, predictably not the best night. And I say that because we were coming in off of like a 3-day really good stretch. I kind of started the video out calling that out. Just naturally speaking, that's kind of what happens. You're not going to be that hot for that long. But part of the reason was Chris Middleton. He was expected to get some minutes, the sustained minutes that he had been getting. He did not get those last night. And so because of that, Chris Middleton was not able to get his over fantasy score. That same thing applies here with Quickly. We're betting on the minutes to be there. And if they're not, probably not going to hit. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and jump on into the next game. We got Boston versus Houston. So last night, I kind of mentioned we could have some pretty good edges with Boston. Sam Hauser was a player we weren't getting prop bets for. That's the annoying part. Like, I would have been dialed in on Sam Hauser for you guys if we were getting the prop bets for him. Because I mentioned, like, with Porzingis off the court, he gets a big bump. But with Jaylen Brown off the court, he gets an even bigger bump. And then with that, I kind of mentioned we could be on Tatum for over his points as well, especially if Jaylen Brown is out. Those two ended up sitting. It was the front end of a back-to-back. Now it's the back end of a back-to-back. I kind of expect one of those two to play, maybe both of those two to play, because this is an appealing game here against Houston, right? A 3-point spread or so, 2.5-point spread or so, decently high-scoring game. I do expect one of those two players to play. We'll see, right? It's tough to really plan for that. And I'm a little bit surprised at some of the lines that we are getting. Like yesterday, I was surprised that we were getting just Boston prop bets in general. And looking at it, guys, we're really not getting that many good bets here for Boston, strangely enough. So let's go ahead and jump into Houston. We are getting kind of one decent bet, and it's a bet that I don't particularly agree with. And that bet is going to be like Jalen Green for over his assist, or even Fred VanVleet for over their assists. Let's take a peek at those two players here. Again, looking at the 9-to-5 PrizePicks cheat sheet. So guys, looking at Jalen Green, we are going to see that this is kind of a good bet for his over assist in terms of, all the other data points besides the sportsbook data and the underdog lines are telling us to kind of bet the over here, projecting it at a slight minutes bump here of 2.79. And that's probably the biggest reason as to why. It's going to bump up his projection. That's going to bump up his average. That's going to bump up the Vegas per minute line there and the DVP. Now, guys, if you're wondering what this all kind of means, I actually just put out a write-up there, how to use the NBA cheat sheet. That's on the 9-to-5 homepage there. So just type in 925 sports spelt out, and you guys will be able to get access to that. There's a video as well linked in there that'll show you guys that as well if you guys are more of someone that needs to watch rather than read. And like for me, guys, it truly comes down to the game log here for Jalen Green, where we are going to notice that he really hasn't been getting this over consistently. We look at all kind of the recent metrics. All of those are kind of telling us about the under. Now on the season, averaging 2.46. And so if this was a matchup in which he was getting a bump from the matchup, I would be fine with that. I honestly think it's telling us to bet the over simply because of this game log here, right? He has not gotten the over consistently there. His regression back to the normal mean, it should be a positive regression there. He should be expected to, get a couple more assists here, kind of like he did in this game against Minnesota, where he got 6 assists to kind of get back to his normal average of about 2.5. That's what I'm reading that as, but it does make sense there. Not exactly a bet that I want to be going out of my way to target, though, as well, because he's not someone that's really going to crush it. He's not someone that's really getting a bump because a player is out. That's not something I need to go out of my way to target. So we'll jump on into the Knicks versus OKC here, guys. Looking at at it, OKC, they're still like banged up in terms of all the same players being out. And so with that, we are still not getting a big minutes bump. And kind of looking at all the players that we would want to be on, I think all the lines are pretty much correct. Really nothing that I feel like we need to be going in on. You know, Isaiah Hartenstein with his points and rebounds, sure. Points, rebounds, and assists, sure. Those could be some good bets. And we can take a quick peek at that as well with Hartenstein, but it's really nothing too crazy here. Like looking at it, guys, maybe his over rebounds is a good kind of sportsbook bet, but the matchup's a little bit difficult. You know, the PRA, when we combine together, like not exactly anything crazy there, really. So let's go ahead and jump back into this game. We'll see if we're getting any good bets on the other side this here for New York. New York, Mitchell Robinson's still out. Jalen Brunson day-to-day. I'm kind of expecting him to play. Miles McBride is questionable as well. We'll see. If they end up sitting, yeah, Mikal Bridges gets a big bump in his usage. Karl-Anthony Towns would get a big bump in his usage. An interesting bet here that we have is going to be OG to get his over rebounds. Not exactly a bet that I feel like we need to go out of our way to target, but he is someone that is getting heavy minutes, 37 or so minutes per game. Maybe we could get there. Not a terrible matchup, kind of a push matchup, maybe. But for the most part, I feel like the lines that we are getting in this game are seemingly correct. So, again, let's go ahead and jump on into the next game here. We got Washington versus the Pelicans. I need to adjust the abbreviation here for the Pelicans, guys, just as an FY. It's not pulling. It should be NOP and it's pulling correctly. That's something I'll try to do after this video. So, the little Koulibaly was out last night. And so, with that, we saw kind of Malcolm Brogdon had a good game. We saw some other players have a good game that we would have expected to have a good game. And so if they are out, yeah, Justin Champagnie would be someone that gets a minutes bump. Thus would be someone that I would really want to bet on for his over points. That would be a very solid bet to me on paper. That'd be a bet that we are getting some good value on there, I would say. And like looking at this, guys, this would be a bet that I don't want to say like a lock bet, but this would be a very encouraging bet to be able to go in on. Now, we can't really bank on those minutes. I kind of expect that Koulibaly will be back tonight. It is an illness. It is the back-to-back, but I think that's why we're not getting that many books giving us this line just yet. It's a bet where I'm fine trying to gain an edge on because I do think if we get that confirmation that it will get bumped, but it's also a bet that has some risk in it. Obviously, if Koulibaly is back, maybe those minutes aren't there, then it's not going to be a great bet there. So risk reward there, I'm kind of, we're betting, right? So I'm going to take the risk sometimes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump on into Dallas versus Cleveland here. So we know that Luka is still out in this game. Dante Exum out. PJ Washington could end up sitting in this game as well. So if that ends up happening, yeah, Spencer Dinwiddie going to get a massive bump in his minutes, but he's also going to get a massive bump in his usage. Same thing for Clay, Derek Lively as well, Kyrie. He's someone that would benefit there as well. So I'm seeing some of these lines that we're getting, like for Derek Lively over his PRA. I'm kind of fine with that, especially if we get news that PJ Washington ends up sitting. I'm kind of okay with that. Now, the issue with going in on Derek Lively or even PJ Washington, where kind of the data is telling us to do that, is this is a more difficult matchup against Cleveland and their bigs. So maybe they could potentially struggle. I don't mind the idea of getting to Dinwiddie, but look at this, guys. Dinwiddie with his points here, they are really giving him a bump in his points, really just kind of banking on that Luka, obviously being out and that production still being high there for him. I don't know if I need to go in on that actually because it's already adjusting for Luka being out. So maybe not as many big edges there. Derek Lively I could get to, especially if PJ Washington's out. But again, we could kind of run the risk of PJ Washington being active and then that bet not being as good. We jump on into Cleveland here. Darius Garland's someone that I do think kind of actually sneakily gets a good edge just because of Luka not being there, more Kyrie defense and more Spencer Dinwiddie defense there. Actually, are we getting any good bets for him? Let's see here. He gets that kind of 2 minutes bump, and I think that's due to the game not being a massive blowout. Only 6.5 point dogs, right? At 7 points is when I really start to worry about a blowout. We are getting some differing lines, guys. Worth calling that out, and we are seeing kind of differing lines there for Garland. So maybe not as much, but one bet that we are really getting that's a good bet that I'm going to show you guys here on the PrizePicks cheat sheet is looking at Dean Wade for his unders. And so looking at guys with Dean Wade, we are noticing that all the data is kind of telling us to bet the under. Not exactly a hammer bet, just because the average sportsbook line and the underdog lines are all kind of agreeing with the assessment that we have here. But across the board, these are all like about 52 to 53% likelihoods to hit. You could do his PRA, you could do his points. They all kind of correlate together, right? So like if one hits, the other one should probably hit there as well. He has been consistently getting his PRA over the past few games now, so a little bit concerning there, but his minutes were a little bit higher in those games, whereas, again, in this game, The projection data kind of likes the under a little bit more there with him. Now, we look at his points, a little bit more consistent there. But again, we look at his projected points versus what he's been getting. That little difference does end up adding up, right? So we need those projected minutes to be a little bit lower than they have been. And actually, if we look at kind of the under 6.5 points here, we are seeing Hard Rock Bet at -140. We are seeing some lines be much more aggressive with that under rating. So to me, that's going to be a bet that probably does get bumped down or just taken off the board there. They're probably going to turn that into a goblin, make it 5.5, and want you to bet the over there because it's a spot where he probably should be. They're trying to bait us into it, is what my guess that will happen, but we'll see. Let's go ahead and jump back into the game-by-game breakdown. We're going to jump on into kind of the last few games here. So with the Spurs, they are going to be without Jeremy Sohan, which does create a little bit of value. Actually, Wemby does see a little bit of bump in his minutes and points with Sohan off the court. We're actually not getting that many prop bets for him just yet, which is a little bit interesting there. Maybe it's a little bit too early on in the day. And so we'll jump on into... Well, for what it's worth, guys, Wemby does average about 2 more points per 36 with Sohan off the court. So if you're looking at his points average, and the line that we're getting is right at his points average, you could be betting the over. Not a terrible matchup there as well. Looking at Memphis, guys, jumping into this next game, Memphis versus the Kings. 4-point spread, very high-scoring game. So probably a game that we want to be targeting. Memphis still extremely banged up. And so, look at this, guys. Long list. Ja's still out. Marcus Smart's still out. Santi Aldama being out is actually pretty huge. Larivia could be out. Zach Edey's actually currently questionable as well. So I'm actually surprised that we are getting some lines here because of how banged up they are. But it also is just a guessing game with how many players are banged up. So kind of risk reward there in that regard. Jaylen Wells for over his PRA is a bet that I don't mind with all those players being out with his expected minutes bump. I could get to that bet. I'm kind of fine with that bet. Maybe even get into Zach Edey with his over kind of PRA there as well. Those are two players real quickly. Let's pull up and look at because Zach Edey does draw a good matchup. Jaylen Wells kind of a push matchup more on the bad side. But I want to take a peek at their games with kind of more minutes than what they're projected to get. So for Jaylen Wells, like his PRA is one that we could be getting to, not terrible there. But again, I just want to take a peek at his game log. So we can see recently, 32 minutes there, 32 minutes there, 28 minutes there. So not actually getting the overs in that game, but let's just sort by minutes. Interesting there. So not as I really kind of thought that this would be a spot where, all right, we see he's projected to get 30 minutes or so. Let's look at those games where he's gotten 30 minutes and look at that PRA. Not exactly the case. So maybe not as good of a bet as I would have thought. Let's take a peek at Zach Edey. Now, the issue with Zach Edey is he is someone that does get into foul trouble, and it's kind of unpredictable foul trouble as well. It doesn't really matter what the matchup is. It just kind of seems like one of those weird things with him. Now, is there a line that we really need to go in on? I mean, maybe his PRA, since Vegas is kind of already telling us to bet the over there at 22.5. Interesting lines here for him. Again, looking at the projected minutes bump actually doesn't really tell us anything. So it's really more due to the matchup, maybe that he would be someone that we could look at for a bump. Let's sort here by game date. And we see kind of hit or miss there. Nothing really there. Interesting there. I thought we would actually be getting some good edge. I'm glad we looked at that there with his game log. So maybe not as good of a bet that I previously thought. But we're with Memphis. They are so banged up. It's really kind of a guessing game there. So Keegan Murray is going to be out for the Kings. And again, with this game being a high-scoring game, we naturally probably want to be targeting some more of the over bets. But again, the lines are already adjusted correctly for a lot of those spots. So really don't need to go on there. I will say Sabonis here, maybe his points and rebounds could be a bet that we get to. If there's other bets in this game that you like, maybe trying to game stack, you could. He is someone that benefits about 2 more points per 36, strangely enough, with Keegan Murray off the court, and about 1 more rebound per 36 with Keegan Murray off the court. Again, kind of a strange data point there, but could be something you guys try to get to. And then we jump on into the last game here. We got the Lakers versus Atlanta. For the Lakers, no crazy stuff, really. Anthony Davis sat out last night. We'll see if he plays tonight. We are getting minutes for him. He's expected to start. And so, yeah, with that, I don't know if we're really getting big edges here. Max Christie is someone that kind of the data somewhat likes a little bit for his over assist. That seems like a fluky one. That seems like one where I don't really need to go out of my way to target. Maybe Hachimura for over his points. Obviously, if AD were to end up staying in this game, that could be a better bet. But I feel like the lines that we're getting there are just seemingly correct there for the Lakers. Looking at Atlanta, they are still kind of thin. If Trey Young were to sit, obviously that would shift a lot of usage to Jalen Johnson, but Jalen Johnson currently questionable as well. If those two were to sit, it kind of becomes a nightmare. This game would end up being more of a blowout for sure. We are seeing differing lines here, guys. 4 points to 3.5 points, which is interesting. Pretty high-scoring game as well. given that news. And so it makes sense why we are only getting those prop bets for those two players, because, well, if one of them sits, the other one, or if, those two players do end up sitting, other players are really going to benefit. But it's kind of strange that we're getting both of them in there. Like, I would assume we would just get Jalen Johnson prop bets or Trey Young prop bets, because if one sits, the other one does get a massive bump in their production. But also, I think the reason why we're getting it is because it would be a blowout if one of them were to sit, or, the blowout risk would be higher, so thus their minutes would be a little bit lower. So it's definitely interesting there. So guys, we're going to be jumping into the 9 to 5 bet of the day. Do just want to do two calls real quick. I already showed you guys the 9 to 5 write-up there. That's available for the NBA cheat sheet, kind of showing you guys how to use the tool. Make sure to check that out if you guys are interested in signing up for the membership to get access to that tool, as well as all the prop tools that are available on the website. Head on over to 9to5sports.com, get access to all the tools for just $10 a month. Best value out there, guys. Take advantage of that. It's worth calling out. Definitely more suited for desktop devices. It can be used on mobile, but more designed for desktops. And as well, if you guys are looking for my fantasy golf content, that's available on the 9 to 5 Golf YouTube channel. Check that out, guys. All right, guys, so getting into the 9 to 5 bet of the day. There are 3 bets here that I think are going to be good bets for us as it sits right now. Wish I could give you guys more. Obviously, as the day progresses, we'll get some good fantasy score prop bets that we could probably be going in on. I don't know if you guys caught it last night. There was LeBron James with his fantasy score that was off by 3 compared to the underdog line and PrizePicks line. Those are kind of spots that obviously throughout the day will be made available on the cheat sheet. Underdog gives their fantasy score lines a lot later in the day, typically like 6 hours before the game, but interesting to call out there for sure that happened. That happens in college basketball a lot, not exactly a lot in the NBA. So interesting spot there. And I call it out because it's a massive day in terms of games played. And so I do expect us to get more of those edges, specifically fantasy scoreline. That's where we see the biggest edges. But right now, as it sits, I do like these 3 prop bets the best. Champagne there to get over 8.5 points. Again, better bet if Koulibaly does end up sitting in the spot. He was out in the last game with an illness. Dean Wade to get under his points. That's one of the better bets that we have on the board today. Again, I kind of expect that to get bumped down or just taken off the board. And then while I was recording this video quickly, was bumped up from 16.5 points to 17. So still a little bit too low. That'll probably get bumped up to 17.5 throughout the day. That's going to do it for the day, guys. Appreciate you guys being here. Good luck with all your bets today. Leave a like on the video. And as always, let's keep cashing.